Zen Buddhism by the numbers, number 5. 5 skandhas, 5 hindrances, Tozan's 5 ranks. 5 skandhas: form, feeling, thought, volition, consciousness. 5 hindrances: sensory desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, doubt. Tozan's 5 ranks: the relative within the absolute within the relative, coming from within the absolute, arrival at mutual integration and unity obtained. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It seems that we have gone from winter to summer in the course of less than a week, with one day of springtime in between. So, it's wonderful though, isn't it? The birds have been wild, especially the woodpeckers. And I have a tendency to have at least one song that goes through my mind during session, and it changes from session to session. A few sessions ago, it was the one that Shinge Roshi sang for us yesterday, with God on our side. This time, though, it's a song that is from Henry Purcell's The Fairy Queen, which is an opera that was done in the 1600s based on Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. And the song is "Come All Ye Songsters." The song is sung by Titania, who's calling all the revelers for the Midsummer Night's Frolic. But she speaks essentially to the birds of the wood. Come all ye songsters, come all ye songsters of the sky, wake and assemble in the wood. But no ill-boding bird be nigh, none but the harmless and the good. I was thinking maybe we can change songsters to zensters. Wake and assemble. That phrase has been going through my head over and over again during the session. Wake and assemble, wake and assemble. All ye zensters, wake and assemble. But no ill-boding bird be nigh, none but the harmless and the good. Beautiful song. I first encountered it in a contemporary version sung by a singer named Nora Fisher, who's just wonderful. And if you ever have the chance to look it up, it's worth listening to that version in particular. It's a beautiful song. I'm not going to attempt to sing it. I would only ruin it. So let's start by just enjoying the weather. Take a deep breath. It's so wonderful. Take a deep breath and go, ah, ah. Doesn't that feel good? One more time. Ah. Ah. So good. So today I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the number 5, which is appropriate because it's the 5th day of session, and the number 4, the Eightfold Path, the 4th of the Four Noble Truths. I was quite correctly chastised by someone for using Rinzai's words rather than my own for the Eightfold Path, and I plead extenuating circumstances because it was, after all, Rinzai's commemoration day. And I also happen to really love Rinzai, so I apologize for that, but you'll get a little bit of my own take on the Eightfold Path interspersed with the 5 skandhas and the 5 hindrances, and probably just a little bit of Tozan's 5 ranks. But before I get to that, I wanted to thank Gento for such a wonderful Dharma talk. Really touched me very deeply. I enjoyed hearing about your Catholic upbringing. My own Catholic upbringing was somewhat the reverse of yours. I came from a family that was not at all devout. We were what's known as an Easter and Christmas Catholic family. You know, we would go to church on Easter and Christmas, and the rest of the year, you know. And I didn't really have any particular feeling for Catholicism or Catholic doctrine or any of that as a kid, and really, by the time I was a teenager, considered myself an atheist, and just all of this is nonsense, not just nonsense. And it wasn't until I came here and started to understand the idea of Easter and the idea of sacrificing your body and that was really brought home to me during the Rohatsu, when I was in such intense pain, that it was like being transported into a different realm. So that was really my reintroduction into Christianity. And actually, after I left the monastery, I ended up exploring Christianity in quite a bit of depth and became a practicing Catholic. And so Easter Sunday has a great deal of significance for me. So getting on to the 5 skandhas. And to understand the Eightfold Path and to understand understanding, right understanding, really begins with the 5 skandhas. Form, feeling, thought, volition, and consciousness. And to look deeply into them, to really see beyond the surface, starting with form, this human form that we have. This human form that we have is, after all, nothing but the sun and the stars. It's just a condensed version. All of the elements come from the stars. All of the energy comes from the sun. The plants that we eat simply convert sun power into chemical power. And we convert that chemical power into a form that we can use. So we are sun and stars. That's our form. And the form gets its substance from the sun and the stars, but it gets its expression from all of our ancestors. Human, inhuman, going back to primordial life. Our DNA is nothing but what's been given to us by our parents, their parents, their parents' parents. And all of the course of evolution throughout millions and millions of years. That's our form. And it's constantly changing according to conditions. We're born helpless, unable to walk, unable to feed ourselves, entirely dependent. And this form couldn't exist without the love of our parents and the support of our community. The food that we eat couldn't be brought to us without conditions conducive to that, including climate, including peace, including a stable government, including roads that can be used to transport it. All of this is in our form. All of it. So, where in this form do you begin and everything else end? Without all of these elements coming together, you couldn't be here. I couldn't be here. Without the sun, the water, the air, the earth, the wind, none of this is possible. So our form is not simply this body sitting here. It's all of this. And the conditions are constantly changing. And we depend entirely on these conditions. And the same with all the other skandhas. Feeling. Where do feelings come from? In one sense, they are a manifestation of biochemical processes, hormones, neurotransmitters, the neural circuitry of the brain. Feelings depend entirely on those things, and those things depend on the inputs that we get from those that we associate with, within the community, within our families, within our employment. All of these feelings of joy, sorrow, pain, excitement, happiness, are not our feelings. They are the feelings that arise from the conditions that we find ourselves in. And the same with thought. Thought is barely possible without language. And the language comes to us in so many forms, with such a vast history. The language of the sutras, the language of the Bible, the language of Shakespeare, the language of our mother, our father, the language of our politicians, the language of movies and television news. How could we have thought without all of these things? All of these things are our thoughts. We call them our thoughts, but they're not our thoughts. They're the product of all of this. It's like our brain and nervous system are an empty space into which is funneled the thought of all of this. Our teachers, our students, our children, and volition. Volition meaning the will, the impulse to act. Some people think that they're strong-willed or weak-willed, that they have an independent mind. They will act only on their own volition. Nonsense. Our volition, like everything else, is a product of conditions. The conditions being inherent in our form, our feeling, our thought, our consciousness, being inherent in the societal norms, being inherent in our social constructs, our desire to please others. Our desire for approval, our desire to avoid shame. This is where volition comes from. It's not something that you have created out of thin air. Nonsense. And consciousness. Consciousness is a very hard word to define. Where does consciousness reside? In one sense, it just means awareness. I'm conscious of this, I'm conscious of that. But really, it's the expression of all of the other skandhas: form, feeling, thought, volition, plus everything around. It's always the interplay, always the exchange. Without the exchange, there's no consciousness. So Sanganshi Zenji in Faith and Mind says the subject is a subject for the object is an object for the subject. Without the object, there's no subject. Without the subject, there's no object. It's always an interplay. This consciousness doesn't just reside here or here or here. It resides here. It's, like everything else, an expression of conditions. None of them have their own intrinsic reality. They are always an expression of mutuality, interdependence. Or as Gento said, quoting Thich Nhat Hanh, interbeing. Always the exchange. And we hear in the Heart Sutra, Avalokiteshvara, doing deep prajna paramita, clearly saw that the 5 skandhas are shunyata. Shunyata, emptiness. Empty of intrinsic reality. Doesn't mean they don't exist, but they don't exist as anything that is separate, anything that is permanent, anything that can be held. They are impermanent, without self. Not to be relied upon. And in that sense, unsatisfactory. The 3 marks of existence. And this is right understanding. To see clearly that form, feeling, thought, volition, consciousness have no self. And these 5 skandhas are what you and I are made of. There's no Hokuto outside of form, feeling, thought, volition, and consciousness. No Ryoju, no Reiko, no Shinge Roshi, no Jika. None of you. Here we are. 5 skandhas just sitting here, enjoying the weather. Perfectly empty of self. But we have the delusion of something permanent, something existing in itself. It's called me, I. And it forms the center of our universe. But it's emptiness which makes it possible for us to live, not being. There's a chapter of the Tao Te Ching chapter 11. I'll read the Stephen Mitchell version. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it's the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it's the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it's the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. And that's us. We think we're solid, we think we're steady, firm, this or that, rich or poor, old or young. But really we're just changing. Always changing, always. Nothing there to hold on to and nothing to depend on. Rinzai said the person of true understanding is one who relies on nothing, depends on nothing. That's a hard saying, because of course we depend on each other. We depend on the community. We depend on conditions. Otherwise, we couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep, we couldn't converse. There's always community. There's always dependence, but the inside, the freedom to see things as they are and to not turn away from that. This is understanding. And understanding is not here. Understanding is not just thinking and intellection and reading a book or having a discussion. Understanding is stubbing your toe, falling down and hurting yourself, watching people that you love die. Understanding is having impermanence rub itself in your face. Understanding is knowing joy and knowing the end of joy, knowing pain and knowing the end of pain. This is where understanding comes from. The second of the Eightfold Path, resolve or intention. There's no better expression of right resolve than Shijo Muhen Seigan no. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to save them all. However inexhaustible delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it. This, however endless the Buddha's way is, just means right now. Right now, I vow to do my best to see clearly, to understand, to do what is needed, to say what is needed. I resolve to die again and again. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it. Again and again. And I'm not even talking about reincarnation, because I honestly don't know anything about reincarnation. I don't remember any past lives. But dying again and again, going into the Zendo and dying again and again. Sacrificing your body again and again. Giving up your ideas about comfort and ease and getting ahead again and again. Learning all of the lessons of life again and again. This is right resolve. This is, however immeasurable Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. Waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Having a panic attack, having anxiety. How do you deal with it? How do you get through this? How do you cut your reliance on comfort? Cut your reliance on received wisdom? And really open your eyes. Really open your heart. How do you do it? Over and over and over again. Every day. Of course, session is a wonderful opportunity to do just that. To die again and again and again. Sometimes, many times in one sitting. Dying and being reborn. Dying and being reborn. Dying and being reborn. The resolve to follow through, step after step. One foot in front of another. Regardless of how unsteady you may feel taking that step. Having trust and faith. That's the other side of understanding. Understanding not from the head, but from the heart, and not just from the heart, but from the entire body. And not just from the entire body, but the earth itself, the Sangha, having faith that whatever happens is your teacher in the moment. Whether it feels good, it feels bad. Whether it causes distress, it causes pain, it causes joy and excitement. Honestly, both extremes are equally dangerous. The excitement of a great experience can totally derange you. The distress of a terrible experience can totally destroy you. They both are dangerous. Neither extreme is healthy. And how do you develop the equanimity to sit in the midst of turmoil, whether we call it good or we call it bad? This equanimity is another name for faith. Faith in mind, in the words of Sosan Ganchi Zenji, sometimes translated as trust in mind. Trust. Nothing intellectual about it. It has to be one. And it has to be one by your resolve to die again and again. The third of the Eightfold Path is speech. Right speech. There are a few rules for right speech. One is that it's generally better to listen than to speak. Generally better to ask questions than to answer them. And when you do have to speak, to say what is true, not to lie. People lie all the time. Some people lie as easily as breathing in and breathing out. It's just they open their mouths and there's no relationship to truth whatsoever. But to speak the truth with as much kindness as possible. And to speak the truth only when necessary. And only when appropriate. The truth spoken out of turn can destroy somebody. It can destroy a relationship. Doesn't mean you have to lie, but you don't necessarily have to give all the truth. To be judicious, to be kind. This is right speech. To speak from the heart.
If someone asks you, you have to speak truth.
Hey?
If someone asks you, you have to speak truth. If it destroys some relationship.
You should always speak the truth, but you can also be silent. And you can speak in a way which is strategic and doesn't throw a monkey wrench. Yeah. You know? If somebody asks you if they like the dress they're wearing, you can say, "Oh, your hair looks lovely." You know? Somebody says, "Does this dress make me look fat?" That dress is just so beautiful.
Oh, that's
Huh? To be strategic does not mean lying. The fourth of the Eightfold Path, right action. Similar to speech, it's better to do nothing than to be busy. Bodhidharma said, Buddhas are lazy. They don't busy themselves with anything. And Rinzai said, it's best to be someone who has nothing to do. You know, how much of our activity is actually worthwhile? But when activity is called for, be your activity. When you're washing the dishes, wash the dishes. When you're vacuuming, vacuum. Be the best vacuumer in the world. When you have to do a job, do the job. Do the job as well as you can. And understand that you will make so-called mistakes. You know, so-called mistakes are not mistakes at all, seen from a different perspective. Where does understanding come from? Understanding comes from dying again and again. From making mistakes, paying the price. Form, feeling, thought, volition, and consciousness. Our feelings are so important. And the feelings are what are fine-tuned by mistakes. We feel our way into what's right. And we feel our way into what's right by making mistakes. Some people are naturally gifted and talented for doing certain things, and they don't seem to make the mistakes that all of us stumble through. And that's wonderful. But it doesn't mean that they will develop true wisdom. If you want to develop true wisdom, you will make mistakes. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a teaching. However immeasurable Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. Dharma teachings aren't what you read in books and what you hear in talks like this. They're the mistakes that you make. The times that you are thrown into it. You stumble your way around. And that's how you develop this strength, this sureness. So that's right action. Right livelihood. In the Buddhist literature, right livelihood is defined mostly by the things that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't be involved in selling drugs or killing or working in the slave trade. In a very narrow sense, yes, that's right livelihood. You avoid doing those things. But right livelihood really, for me, it was kind of a way of considering my life and how I was to make a living in a way that was going to be helpful, going to affect the community in as positive a way as possible, would affect my family in as positive a way as possible, and was true to my own nature. It's hard sometimes to find such a livelihood. But this is the ideal to work towards. Something which is true to your nature. Something which is helpful. Something which allows you to grow, to develop. This is the ideal. This is the thing to strive for. And sometimes it's very hard to get such a livelihood. In my case, it meant, oh boy, a lot of years of study and being very, very poor. So sometimes you have to sacrifice to have the livelihood that is most appropriate. Well, I think that may be it for the Eightfold Path for now, because I'm not going to get to the 5 hindrances unless I shift gears a little bit. But that's okay, because the 5 hindrances have a lot to do with effort, mindfulness, and meditation. The 5 hindrances. Just listing them, sensory desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. In this warm weather, you get thirsty, you know? Which reminds me, as a public service announcement, please make sure that you're well hydrated. Seriously. The weather has changed kind of abruptly. You will sweat a lot more. Even if you don't notice the sweat, you are transpiring, perspiring, and you will easily become dehydrated. You may think that because you're doing Zazen, you're not doing physical labor, and therefore you don't really need to drink that much, but believe me, you do. Okay, so public service announcement, please take it seriously. Be well hydrated. Okay, so the 5 hindrances. Sensory desire. In the grossest sense, sensory desire refers to things like sexual desire, desire for particular kinds of food, desire for particular kinds of comfort. And these things in and of themselves are not harmful, but they can really be an obstruction to practice. And they can be an obstruction to a healthy life. They can be an obstruction to a healthy community. We have so many instances of inappropriate sexual activity destroying communities. In Buddhist temples, in the Catholic Church, so many religious organizations, of course including our own, have been severely affected by sensory desire. The 5 hindrances are meant specifically as things which affect your meditation, specifically as things which make it difficult to meditate, make it hard to focus, concentrate, to draw in your energy. But equally, they are things which can damage community, damage your life. And honestly, where's the dividing line between life and practice? Right effort is the effort to avoid harmful thought, harmful action, harmful inclinations. Right effort is having the right amount of force placed in the right place at the right time. And knowing where the force is inappropriate and understanding how that inappropriate force can damage your meditation, damage your practice, damage any hope of awakening, and damage the practice of others. sensory desire is closely linked to the poison of grasping or greed, the wanting, grasping, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. And it can be very subtle sometimes. You know, when you're using social media and you click a like, or you see somebody liked your post. A little dopamine hit. That dopamine hit is an addictive force. This is sensory desire also. It doesn't have to be for sex or food or fancy clothes, or it can be just that dopamine hit. That's also a form of sensory desire. So something to watch out for. Addictions of all kinds. Ill will is closely related to the poison of aversion or anger. This hostility. And this is also in many ways related to right speech. It's always better to listen and to question and to find common ground than it is to throw up a wall, throw up a barrier, throw up the barrier of hostility. Your first inclination may be to think, oh, this person is impossible. The ignorance and arrogance of this person is impossible. And they may very well be ignorant and arrogant. But to throw up that wall is in itself ignorant and arrogant. To listen to extend courtesy and kindness, even though they may be fools. Be warm and compassionate toward them. Ill will not only hurt the person that it is directed towards, it much more so will hurt you. To hold on to anger, to hold on to fear, ill will also refers to aversion as it arises in yourself. The things in yourself that you don't like. The pain that arises. And fighting against that. Fighting against your wandering mind. Fighting with this idea of this is unacceptable. Instead of saying, well, what's going on here? And listening. You don't only listen to other people, you listen to your knees when you're sitting. You listen to your backside. You listen to your hara. You listen to all of the things that are happening inside of you when you're meditating. And you listen with curiosity and kindness instead of rejection, instead of the equivalent of calling someone ignorant and arrogant and throwing up a wall against them is to say, my knee hurts, it's terrible, it's awful, it's this, it's that. This is throwing up a wall. This is ill will. I can't focus on my koan. This is ill will. What's actually going on? Listen to yourself. Listen to what's going on. Get rid of this ill will. Just put it aside and listen. Sloth and torpor, which is kind of the opposite of right effort. If right effort is putting energy where it's needed with the right amount of force at the right time, sloth and torpor is having no energy whatsoever and no desire to exert the energy. That's sloth. Torpor is just that feeling of being dead. And I'm sure that everybody has had that experience in Zazen. I know for sure that I have. That feeling that just, well, nothing's happening, I can't make anything happen, it ain't happening. Now, do you approach this sloth and torpor with ill will? Do you blame yourself? God damn it. Here I am again, sleeping in Zazen. And there's nothing I can do about it. Well, yeah, actually there is something you can do about it. You can be curious about it. You can just look at it and say, what is this? Where is this coming from? What does this feel like? And if you can actually generate this curiosity, which is right effort, if you can generate this curiosity and this sense of kindness towards yourself, the sense of kindness towards this deadness that you're feeling, why is it there? Is it because I haven't slept? Is it because I'm not interested? It's actually an expression of the third of the three poisons, which is ignorance. And ignorance we think of as delusion, folly, but the root word in ignorance is ignore. When nothing is happening, we tend to shut down. It's boring. So we shut down. Perfectly natural. You know, there are three feeling tones: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Neutral is boring. We'd rather have pain than have no sensation at all. There was a psychological experiment in which they had people sit in a room with nothing to do, kind of like Zazen. But instead of doing Zazen, there was a button on the table which would administer an electric shock And when people got bored enough, they would give themselves a shock. Because the boredom was harder to take than the pain. You know, when you're shutting down because nothing is happening, that's what happens. There's nothing happening. There's a great cartoon by Gay and Wilson in which two monks are sitting next to each other. They look like Zen monks or Tibetan monks. And one is young and one is old. And the young one obviously has just asked a question, and the old one says, "Nothing happens next." Nothing happens next. That's it. Nothing happens, so what are you going to do about it? Get curious. What's going on? What is this? This feeling of deadness, where is this coming from? What is it? How is it experienced? That's the way out of sloth and torpor. The next of the 5 hindrances is restlessness and worry. Restlessness and worry. When your mind is wandering, going a mile a minute, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, what's for lunch, I didn't like what was for breakfast, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. I have an exam coming up when I get back, I haven't studied for it, I have a deadline, this or that. This is restlessness and worry. When you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're having a panic attack, that's restlessness and worry too. You know, it's not just on the cushion. It's everything. The rushing around inside here and inside here. This is an obstruction to deep samadhi. An obstruction to really being present. And the cure for it is mindfulness. The cure for it is to really be present. Now, this might mean just focusing on a neutral part of your body. It might mean doing a body scan. It might mean doing loving kindness meditation to open your heart in a way that allows the restlessness and worry to just die by itself. And the final part of the 5 hindrances is doubt. Doubt, first of all, in your ability to awaken. To think that there's something that you're lacking. Something that the Buddha had that I don't have. Something that Rinzai had that I don't have. They had a human heart. They had a human mind. They had a human body, just like yours. They were made up of the 5 skandhas, just like you. You have everything that you need. Doubt that the way is efficacious, that it can be accomplished, that it can be followed. Doubt is pernicious. And it really can only be cured by putting one foot in front of another. by making mistakes and learning from them, by patience, by perseverance, by kindness, kindness towards yourself. And faith, not faith in the sense of believing received wisdom, but faith that this is possible. That peace is possible. That equanimity is possible. That freedom is possible. Even when you don't feel free, even when you feel burdened. To know that everyone who has ever accomplished the way was exactly in your position. And it's getting late, and I've kept you a very long time. I'm not going to touch on Tozan's 5 ranks, but this being the Easter week, I wanted to share with you a poem that I wrote a while back. And it has a lot to do with everything that I've been speaking about, the 5 skandhas and the Eightfold Path and doubt. The kingdom of heaven is not a kingdom. It has no boundaries or borders, no rivers or streams, no mountains or valleys. It has no occupant. It extends across all space and time, humbly sitting in your exalted body and mind. Who is the king of this fabulous realm? He looks lovingly at you from the morning mirror as you shave, imploring, careful, don't cut yourself.